that timeless saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. By that phrase, of course, we mean that you can force people only so far. Eventually, you reach a point where there's nothing more you can do, and only the other person can do it. I admit this phrase always confused me as a kid. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Because in my innocent child mind, I thought, well, why wouldn't the horse want to drink? Even if the horse isn't necessarily thirsty, I mean, it's water. Why not just drink it? The horse is going to need it eventually. The horse is going to get thirsty. So why wouldn't the horse do what's best for itself and just drink the water? Now that I'm an adult, I understand that phrase a whole lot better. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, even if it's the best thing for the horse. No matter how much you want that horse to drink, no matter how good that water can be for that horse can still decide, after all that it's just not going to drink. It's just not going to do it. Even if that means dehydration, and even if that means death. Human beings especially have this odd quirk of our combined personalities, that even when we know something is good for us, we won't take it. Even if we know that something can make our lives better, that something can make us better people, it doesn't matter that we know that. There are times when we still won't do it. Last summer, I went to the doctor for the first time in probably a decade. Not because I didn't need to. Not because I shouldn't have been. I knew I should have been going to the doctor. I knew that it was probably good for me. I knew that when I got my blood work back and the doctor said, you're pretty healthy, but you could stand to adjust your diet and exercise a little bit. He wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know. Believe me, I can feel when the waistband of my pants is getting tighter. I know that there are things I should be doing that are better for me, that will make my life better and healthier and richer and fuller, and I still don't do them. And I suspect that I am not alone in this room, either with that particular thing or other things that we know we should do. We've been told we should do. We know will make us better and healthier. But we are not going to do them. We are not going to let that healthier life get in the way of what we want to do. We're not going to let being better people get in the way of our wants and needs. And when we put it that way, it sounds pretty ridiculous, doesn't it? Ooh, who said that? I didn't write this down, so you must be reading my mind, because that was my next line. It's selfish. It's selfish to think that we could not drink the water just because we don't want to. That we don't want to live better lives simply because it'll get in the way of what we really want. How selfish. How unhealthy. How absurd. And yet this is human nature, isn't it? This ability to look directly into the eyes of what will make us better, of what will will make us healthier and say, nah, that's not for me. I have other plans. I want something else. How dare you bring me to this water and say I should drink? I know I'm dehydrated. Don't you think I know that? I can tell. But I'm not going to drink. I want tap water. I want bottled water. I want filtered water. Bring me to this stream. This isn't what I want. How dare you? How dare you think that you know what's best for me? When Jesus talks about Jerusalem, it's important to know that this is where he's going. The way Luke writes his story in the gospel is that Jesus goes around from town to town, and he's doing his miracles, he's doing his teaching, he's recruiting his disciples, and there's a turning point. There's a turning point where eventually Jesus stops his itinerant preaching, turns toward Jerusalem, and for the next half of the book of the Gospel according to Luke, Jesus is slowly making his way toward Jerusalem. It takes him forever to get there. It's definitely a literary device because he starts like 10 miles away. But it takes him forever to get there, this slow march toward Jerusalem. This slow journey toward what he knows is going to happen. Because he knows he's going to suffer. He knows he's going to die. And it's going to be at Jerusalem. Which makes his response to the Pharisees a little more than tongue-in-cheek and sarcasm. One, did anybody else think it was odd that the Pharisees were warning him that he was going to be killed and to get out of there? Changes our view of the Pharisees a little. But his response is, you don't need to worry about Herod trying to kill me. I'm not in Jerusalem. And prophets cannot die outside of Jerusalem. He's not being prophetic. He's making a jab at that. That when prophets come from God to give their message, when the prophets deliver God's word to the people of Jerusalem, the holy city, the resting place of God's name, the center of Judean life, whenever the prophets go there, they're killed. Jerusalem doesn't necessarily want to hear what God has to say. Even though I'm sure they know that what God has to say is good for them. That when God speaks, they should listen. That when God goes through the trouble of sending them a prophet, someone in the flesh who can speak God's words to them in a way that they can hear, in a way that they can understand, even when God goes through all of that trouble, Jerusalem is going to say, I don't think so. I don't really want to do this. I know this is good for me. I know that the words you're bringing, prophet, are God's words, but you know they're a little inconvenient. They ask me to change my life. They ask me to be better than I am. They dare me to live into the covenant that was made with my ancestor Abraham. A covenant that you said was everlasting. A covenant between us that laid out how we would live in relationship to each other. It's not really my thing, God. It's not really what I want to do. And if you keep this up, if you keep telling us through this prophet that this is what we need to do, we're going to shut the prophet up. Because we don't want to hear it. We don't need you in our lives, God. But we know the truth, don't we? Even when we don't want to admit it, we know the truth. We know that that water is good for us. We know that what God says is good for us. We know that this relationship God has forged with us is a relationship of love and trust and respect and mutuality and forgiveness. We know that. We know that as much as the horse at the stream knows that the water is good for it. We know that the water that was poured over us in our baptism brings us life. It's not a matter of not knowing. I know all sorts of things that are good for me that I never do. You probably do as well. It's not a matter of not knowing. Because we do know. Whether we want to admit it or not, we do know. It's not a knowledge problem. It's a will problem. We cannot will ourselves to be the perfect people God intended us to be. We cannot will ourselves to overcome temptation. We cannot will ourselves to have stronger and better faith. We cannot will ourselves to be better. We cannot force ourselves to turn our backs on death, the devil, sin, evil. We don't have the will. We don't have the motivation. We don't have the strength. But this is where the good news of Jesus Christ comes in. This is what makes our relationship with our God different than everybody else's relationship with their gods, especially the gods of money, power, fame, status. Because we don't have the willpower to be better. We don't have the strength to be perfect. We don't have the will to resist temptation. But it's not up to us. Because God has the will to overcome temptation. And God did in the person of Jesus Christ. God has the will to be perfect. And Jesus Christ was perfect. We don't have the will to love God as we should. But God has the will to love us far more than we deserve. We don't have the will or the power or the strength to save ourselves. But God does. And God did. Where we are weak, God is strong. Where we fall, God picks us up. Where we are dragged to that stream, dehydrated and on the brink of death, and unable to drink for ourselves, God cradles our head, tilts it up, and pours life-giving water into our dry and dusty mouths. The story of Jesus Christ, the story of God working in our world, is a story of grace, is a story of mercy, is a story of forgiveness. All those things that we are called to practice in our daily lives, God did for us first. We know that it's good for us. We also know that we can't do it on our own power. But we also know, thanks be to God, we also know that God lifts us up, takes us out of our sin, out of our temptation, and says, you can't do this, but I can. And I love you enough. I care about you so much that not only can I, but I have. It's already been done. I've already made it possible. I've already made it true. So we know what keeps us back. We know what we can do to make us better. And we know we can't do it. But I hope that you know that even though you can't do it, God can. God does. And through that relationship, you'll find that we can be far better and far more loving and far more accepting than we ever thought we could on our own. Thanks be to God.